Started, everybody. If you wouldn't mind having a seat, that would be great. I'll just wait a couple minutes till everybody finds a chair. I'll wait for you, Mark. Yeah, you're welcome. I feel like I need my sunglasses up here. All right, let's get started. First, a very hearty welcome to all of you. So very thankful that you're here. My name is Lisa Clark, and I am the Interim Executive Director for the Economic Development Agency for DMC. And some of you I recognize, actually many of you I recognize, and I want to thank you for being here this evening. It's cold, and wouldn't it be nice to be snuggled up at home, and here you are, which once again is a testament to what you all do, is you come out to events like this and to efforts like this, and DMC is just really fortunate to have all of you here. So thank you very much for being here. We've had a big day today. We've had a DMCC board meeting. We've had a joint planning session where we talked about DMC efforts. All of those have been public and they will be online. So please make sure if you're interested, if you don't hear everything you needed to know about DMC tonight, we will be online and you can join us there, and plenty of opportunity for you to share questions and comments about the DMC plan. So today, a little bit about what you're going to hear today. We're going to talk a little bit about the goals and objectives, and I want to share a bit of information about our best practice trips. So my colleagues on the stage, the planners for DMC, some of our elected officials, some of our DMCC board members, some of our EDA board members went on some journeys across the United States to take a look at some different communities and see what is it that we can learn from these communities, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what little pearls and treasures and gems can we glean from what they've done and bring it back here to Rochester, Minnesota. So I'm going to go over a little bit of that, and we're going to talk about the development plan, which is in we call it the development plan, but I think what you're very interested in is the master plan, which is the concepts that you've been seeing with us for the last, probably 6, 7, 8 months. The information that you've been sharing with us, I just wanted you to know, has been incredibly valuable. We've heard from you online. We've heard from you in presentations that we've been giving all across the state. We've heard from you at these sessions. We've heard from you at the sessions after the sessions. I've spoken with many of you on the phone. Your ideas have been wonderful. Some of you are over the top excited about DMC. Some of you are wondering about DMC. It's big. I want to figure out what it means to me. And there are some people that aren't exactly even thrilled about DMC. And I'm actually very happy to hear all of those comments, because I can honestly tell you, I've worked with these colleagues every day, hour after hour, on the phone or in person, and all of your comments come up. We've talked about them, we've batted them around, we've done arm wrestling, we've argued, we've been jovial, all the things that work when you're putting a team together and creating something better. So every time you have shared, our project has gotten better. So sincere thank you. It's not just lip service. It truly has, every single day, this plan gets better and it changes. And I want to thank you for that. Plans like this, when communities go through something this huge, it takes champions, and it takes leaders, and it takes people that are ready to step up and go uphill when you got to go uphill, and that's all of you right here, sitting right here. So it means a lot that you're here. It really does, and I hope we have something great to show you. And again, we have an opportunity today to hear from you. We have a Q&A session, and then we follow it up with an opportunity for you to visit with our planners. So I hope that that works for you. We're trying to do every single way one can imagine to get input from this community. So I hope this works for you this evening. All right, so I always do this and everybody laughs at me, but I always want to remind people why we're here. When we started DMC years ago, it was an idea and a concept and a thought. And then people and groups have added to this concept and this thought, and it just grows and it gets bigger and better and more thoughtful, more intentional and more deliberate. It takes a lot of ideas and a lot of creativity to put a plan like this together. When we visited the other sites, they were telling us go big and go bold, and I think we've done that. So I want to remind everybody about what the goals were, the original intent of the goals, and we did this morning at the board meeting as well, so that everybody can be grounded in what this thing is all about, because if you lose scope a little bit, it can become everything to everybody, and then it won't be a true destination medical center that we've been talking about in the original intent. So first, we talked about creating a comprehensive strategic plan. That's what we've been working on with lots of groups and lots of individuals for the last year or so. And I think we have a wonderful plan that we can harness this energy and creativity of this community to bring this plan forward for the future of Rochester, Minnesota. We want to leverage $585 million to attract $5 to $6 billion to this community. You've heard me say it before, probably, that it's not about spending the $585 million. The plans that you will see this evening is a $6 billion plan. The $585 million is the public infrastructure support that will support the private investment of $5 to $6 billion. So the last thing, or the thing that people are asking me a lot about lately, is how are we going to afford all of this? And the answer is, this is an aspirational plan. This is a plan that we want to reach toward. And we can get there. And some things won't happen, but many things could happen. We just got to stay the course and really focus on the plan. We believe that this will create 35,000 to 45,000 new jobs. Remember, it's a 20-year plan. Over 20 years. We've done this, you guys. This community has done this. We've added a lot of jobs over the 20 years previous to this. So we can do this, and we'll do it by planning. There are so many groups in this community right now that are truly planning every day about what will we do about housing, what will we do about the social impacts of this kind of growth, what will we do about development, what will we do about homeless. There's so many issues that we will be addressing, and we're doing it as a community. We're going to plan for it. It's not all going to land tomorrow. It's over 20 years. We will generate $7.5 to $8 billion in new net tax revenue, and we will achieve the highest quality patient, visitor, and resident experience. Because remember, DMC isn't just about patients. It's not just about building a building. And it's not just about a product or a new service. It's about all of these things working together to create the experience for patients when they visit, to create the experience for visitors, the experience that they expect, and to create the experience for us, those of us who live here every day, and we want the best community as well. And so I believe that this plan will really help us and take us to that place. Okay. So there, you're finished with the goals and objectives. I want to visit a little bit about the best practice communities that we went to. It was fascinating. It was wonderful. You know, I've been doing this for a few years now and looking all over the world to find the best cities and the best practices and the best transportation and the best buses and the best modes of parking. And there's nothing better than going there. So we took some DMCC board members and we took the EDA board members and our staff, and we went to visit these cities. And we worked pretty hard. We went to Portland, we went to Seattle, Bellevue, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. And I want to share a few takeaways. One of the things we learned very quickly and every single city taught us is about transportation. They said transportation is the key to this kind of development. Transportation will take you to the future. Transportation will drive development. Transportation will get us around downtown. Transportation will help with issues such as perhaps too many cars in the downtown area. Let's try to figure out modes of transportation so that we don't have that type of congestion. Transportation will help all of us who are trying to get to downtown Rochester area get home again in a thoughtful manner and something that we trust. We have a schedule. We understand that we can get downtown and back. So there were great transportation. Many of the cities told us, think smart and big and early about transportation. Don't have it be an afterthought because you'll be playing catch up all the time. Collaboration. It can't be about one group, waving the banner. It has to be about different groups working together. The city has to work together with DMC, has to work together with the county, has to work together with the state, has to work together with the communities and the businesses, in the education arenas. We need to all work together to make this thing work. Quality of life. This really is about quality of life. I've heard it a lot in the last few days, actually, recently, people talking about, it's all great to see all these buildings, but what's inside of them? It's great to build something, but it doesn't work unless you figure out what goes on inside. What about the people? And what about the activity? And what about the gathering spaces? We learned so much about public gathering spaces. People want to go to public places. Our patients want to go to places where people are healthy. They want to feel healthy, even just for a couple hours. They want to go to a public space where there's a lot of activity and energy, and they want to feel good. And I think we can create that, and we've done a great job as a community. One interesting thing I learned, we're trying to attract the best and brightest every single day. The population that we're trying to attract are younger people, of course, and those people want to live and work in the same environment. They want to be downtown. They want to live downtown, they want to work downtown, they want to play downtown. And I think that's pretty interesting. So our population and our demographics are taking us that way, and we need to create an environment that provides that ecosystem for the new staff of the future. We're all talking about workforce. A couple of other things. Innovation. You'll see a little bit about Discovery Square, where we want to bring researchers and technology people and scientists and education, bring them all together so that they can create and innovate and work together to create the new businesses of the future, new products, new services. And I think Discovery Square, when you see that, you'll be able to see what that really means, where people can come together in one place and do all of this together, and they want to be close to Mayo Clinic. They want to touch Mayo. They want to meet with the docs. They want to meet with the researchers. I mean, what a great opportunity. Today I was in a meeting. How many of you, I'm going to do a little show of hands, how many of you have remembered the cartoon The Jetsons? Didn't you love that one? So today I felt like I was in The Jetsons. We were talking about robots that park cars. You drop off your car and this robot takes your car and parks at places. We were talking about all of these things about the future. This plan is not that crazy, Jetsons, but it really reminded me of The Jetsons because it's today. I mean, all those things that we were watching in years back, it's today, and we're actually being able to experience it and create it. We are creating our future. To me, that's pretty darn exciting. And I'm assuming it is for you because you are all sitting right here. So that was a bit about our takeaways for the best practices. We learned a lot. Happy to share with you. It's online. We have best practice information online. I want you to look at that. You'll see what other cities are doing, what other communities are doing, what worked, what didn't work, the good, the bad, the ugly of all the other communities that we've seen. And I think it's going to help inform our plan as well. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to turn it over to Peter Cavalluzzi. Peter is our master planner. He's been in front of this group before multiple times, and he's going to share with you the latest and greatest in terms of how far we've come. Our plan has evolved a little bit, and he's going to share that with you. We'll turn it over to a few more planners after that to share some information with you. We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about how this plan works and how it all knits together. And then we're going to do an open Q&A so that people can have an opportunity to ask questions. So Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks everyone for coming tonight. And I think for the veterans that have been attending these meetings, I think what you'll see tonight is really not a lot has changed in terms of the basic design principles that we've established with you over the past 6 or 8 months. But what you will see are more refinements to those principles and a little more of a physical illustration of the great places that we've tried to create within the heart of downtown Rochester. You know, most master plans fail because they focus exclusively on buildings. And so we're doing something that's really really radical in that we're focusing on how we can leverage private and public development and use those buildings to create great places that will attract everyone to come to the downtown. The best and brightest of our new workforce, the current residents, doctors, scientists, and visitors to come to Rochester. Another key principle that you'll see in our designs is we really tried to take time to learn about Rochester, the physical qualities of Rochester, the culture of Rochester. And really, in many ways, we did something very simple, and that is we just extend and enhance what's already here. So that even though you'll see tonight some of these plans are pretty extravagant and pretty bold, they really are rooted in some of the physical qualities and the characteristics that exist here today. So at the end of this, we want a place that feels like it belongs here and feels like it's an evolution of the city of Rochester. So where I'm going to take you through about 6 key places that will really lead the way to the redevelopment of the downtown. And we always start our presentation with this overhead view of the downtown, the existing downtown. One of the key characteristics, again, you already have a very compact, dense downtown area that's very convenient. So we're going to leverage that. You already have a beautiful river that makes its way through the downtown, but it's disconnected from the downtown, and we want to reconnect the downtown to the river. We also want to fill up a lot of those empty parking spaces that exist in this photo and just really enhance the fabric and structure of the downtown. This is an overhead view of what Rochester may look like 20 years from now. As Lisa said, the plan is illustrating $6 billion worth of investment. So we're taking that $583 million, we're investing it in a really strategic and judicious way so that we can attract development into the downtown and really enhance the whole downtown area. So you see a very vibrant place, but you still see the structure and fabric of the existing downtown reading through this image. The plan is totally integrated. Again, it's a series of key places that are very inclusive, that will create new addresses for residents, for new businesses, for healthcare facilities, and they're all connected in a compact urban core that make it really convenient for residents to live within the heart of the city. The heart of the city is really, again, the first place where we want to start. It's the most visible part of the downtown, and we've identified a location, First and First, that's First Street and First Avenue, where we think we can begin this development. We chose that location because it's right in the heart of Peace Plaza, but it's also within the heart of the existing cluster of buildings within the downtown. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we have envisioned for First and First. The First and First location, again, is part of this connected city. We use this diagram to illustrate what the city will look like perhaps in 20 years. Again, the plans are flexible, they will evolve. One thing that we've talked about as a team is that even though the designs are very specific, so we want to illustrate the ideas, what we can be very certain of is as we go forward into implementation, these designs will continue to grow and evolve and change and adapt to the criteria that we need to respond to. So it won't look exactly like what you see tonight, but the principles will remain the same. The 1,000 feet is really to indicate how connected the downtown currently is. If you look at this drawing, you can connect from the Mayo Clinic at the Gonda building to Discovery Square, which is just south, that beautiful park that is just south of the Gonda building. You can get all the way to the convention center and the waterfront. All of Peace Plaza is connected within that 1,000 feet. So really all of the great destinations, amenities, and facilities within the heart of the city are very conveniently located with one another. And so we're going to take that attribute and really build upon it as we develop this plan. We want to continue the vision that was established by the Plummer Building and the aspiration that reflects. And so our architecture needs to be bold. It needs to really reflect the new technology and the new economic development that we want to create. At the same time, always respecting the past, featuring the past as part of the cityscape, and really being inspired by the vision that was established many, many, many years ago. So the First and First plan really contains many great places. It contains a new entry point that we're calling the Portal, which is on 2nd Street. It's right at the doorstep of the Gonda Building and the Mayo Clinic. It will be the front door to the Peace Plaza area and Mayo Clinic, as well as the front door to Discovery Square to the south. We have a feature that we're calling the Light Pavilion. That's a covering over First and First that will be sort of a must-see destination, really marking that as the town square within the heart of the city. And we'll talk about how that's going to really generate new development within Peace Plaza and maybe correct some of the design flaws that we see in Peace Plaza. We also feature the Plummer Building. It's a beautiful, iconic structure, already exists. How can we flatter that building by creating this beautiful crescent shape of space on 2nd Street to really flatter that building and make it an even more important structure within the downtown. This is a photograph of the First and First location, and I think everyone in this room would agree that the view of the bank building with the glass facade and the block view down First Avenue is not an attractive view, even though it is located right in the middle of the city. So we look at that and we say there's an opportunity here to improve this location and really emphasize the center of the downtown. We also look at properties that are surrounding First and First and see pieces of blocks and elements of blocks that might provide opportunities for redevelopment and also might provide opportunities to connect these developments in a way that make it more impactful right at First and First. We also have the opportunity to really connect the Skyway system and the subway system to the street. You go down in the subway on any given day in the wintertime, certainly at the Gonda Building, and there's lots of activity, lots of people walking around, but you go up in Peace Plaza and you don't see anything. And so we want to reveal that activity and make it more connected to the street. And the same goes for the Skyway. And this location is where all of those systems come together. You'll see in this presentation, we've sort of inserted a few questions that we've heard from the public. And I've shown the first one here, how arts and culture will be integrated in the plan. That's a key part of our design, and you'll see in all the illustrations how we depict culture, both physical art, sculptures, light pavilions, how we provide for performance venues so that we make culture truly integrated into all the public spaces. Here at Peace Plaza, we see a great opportunity to leverage the Chateau Theater. It's currently the bookstore. Bookstore is going to be moving out soon, and we see the Chateau Theater as a great opportunity to reestablish it as a theater, have it also provide a space for performances and cultural venues, but also use the theater as a way to theme this First and First location and make that location more dramatic, more theatrical, and more reflective of being the center of the city. We also looked around the U.S. and across the world at great places where great intersections are marked with physical features, and this is Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, where they've created a beautiful ceiling over a town square, and it lights up at night and really creates a beautiful enclosed feeling right in the heart of that part of the city. And even though these elements are in other places, we want to tailor these ideas, interpret these ideas, and see how they might apply to Rochester. We also look to more historic precedents. This is the Galleria in Milan. If you've been there, it's a beautiful urban space. People walk through. It's all connected to the downtown fabric, but it really marks the heart of their city, their First and First, and we want to do something in our First and First location that really reflects that kind of exuberance. So this is an overhead view of how all of these elements come together. You see right at First and First, right in the middle of Peace Plaza, we have a feature called the Light Pavilion. It connects all four corners of that block. It will be a ceiling to the space, and at night it will have light elements and visual displays and artistic features that really make it a must-see within the downtown. It'll be directly connected architecturally and programmatically to the Chateau Theater. We've created what we're calling the balcony, playing off the idea of a balcony in the theater, and that will now span across First Avenue, but that will be more open. It will be a dining terrace and give people a panoramic view of Peace Plaza. Further to the west at the Gonda building, we have a feature we're calling the Ice Pavilion, and you'll see some drawings on this. This is a Rockefeller Center type of development where we open up the plaza where all those people are, and we create a beautiful ice sheet and plaza for people to look out on and really warm the hearts and spirits of people that are coming to the Mayo Clinic, and really integrating and creating a mix of uses that is really surprising for healthcare. Healthcare is generally a very scientific and sometimes can be a cold environment, and we think by bringing more active programs that are more warm and inspiring will benefit patients, but it also will benefit the downtown. Just to the south of that, along the Plummer building, we have the portal. We're creating a beautiful crescent-shaped public space just at the base of the Plummer building. We're using the tower of the Plummer building as the axis of that space, so it feels like it's been specifically designed for the Plummer building, but it also acts as a front door to Peace Plaza and the Mayo Clinic, but also a front door to Discovery Square to the south. On the far east end, we've created what we're calling the Waterfront Passage. This is that end of Peace Plaza that's currently blocked off with the shopping mall. There's an entrance there, but a lot of people have said, boy, it'd be great if we could make a more strong connection to the east, and as you'll see, that connection is very important to developing our downtown waterfront. We want to take that activity and make a free flow between Peace Plaza and the downtown and the downtown waterfront. So this is an overhead view of the Light Pavilion. You're looking actually to the southwest. The Light Pavilion is spanning across First and First, and it's sort of a ceiling over a great space like the Galleria in Milan, like Potsdamer Platz. It's connecting 4 blocks. We've recast the bank building so that it becomes a beautiful terrace that overlooks Peace Plaza. We've connected the Chateau Theater into the architecture and placement of that space so that we can bring in the historic qualities and the memories and the great memories of the Chateau Theater. We've also shown new development. There's some parcels that have been bought recently by developers, and we want to encourage that private development, but we want to use that development in a way that complements our overall vision. So it's totally integrated. It's specifically designed for this place, can exist nowhere else but at First and First in Rochester, and we think this is a great way to really accentuate the heart of the city. On either side, you see, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see the Ice Pavilion. I'll show you some more photos of that. And then on the left-hand side of this, you see the passage, the waterfront passage that we're creating to move to the downtown waterfront. This balcony space, like the balcony at the Chateau Theater, and this is a view of the Lincoln Center balcony just outside the theater doors. We want to create a place for people to look out during performances and see the activity that's happening in Peace Plaza. Also create a beautiful dining vantage point for people to have meals before the movies at the Chateau Theater or before they go shopping. So we want to reveal that activity in everything that we do in this space. This is just a sketch view of what that might look like. You see the beautiful balcony in the foreground there, looking south on First Avenue, and all 4 corners totally integrated into this plan, and a beautiful ceiling across the First and First location. This is the Gonda building base, and even though it's a very beautifully designed base to the building, it's sort of closed off. It also has the subway and skyway system all coming together in that location, and you see the photos on the right-hand side. The spaces in the subway can be sort of foreboding and very mundane, and so we seek to really open them up and make them more contributing to Peace Plaza. We think we can open up the base along Gonda Tower and make it something that really contributes to the overall activity. This is a view from the atrium space within the Gonda Tower. You see the Plummer building in the distance. You see the ice ice sheet in the center of this view. The existing passages will look out on this beautiful plaza, so daylight will come down into the subway system, and this will create a more welcoming and warm atmosphere for visitors, patients, workers that are coming to the clinic, as well as people that are coming to Peace Plaza. This is another overhead view of how that space might be knitted into the fabric of Peace Plaza, again reflecting the entrance to the Mayo Clinic, the Kaler building, reflecting the entrance to Peace Plaza, but really creating a central place, a real crescendo at the west end of Peace Plaza. And then on the east end, we have the shopping mall. The gesture is there. There's a passage, there's doorways that allow you to go to the east, go to the waterfront, but it needs to be made more gracious and grand and welcoming. We use this moment to talk a bit about downtown businesses. You see these plans and how we're creating new development, but we want to talk about how local businesses can make up that fabric and that activity and economic development within the downtown. And I'm going to ask Bill to make a few comments about businesses that are local to Rochester and how we keep that as part of the plan.
Thank you. The development program for the plan is based on a market analysis that we talked about in the summer. And in that, we were looking at the incremental growth. And so the plan reflects the existing inventory of space for businesses and then accommodates incremental growth beyond that. So it's not accommodating space to replace what already exists. To the extent there might be a site where somebody replaces what already exists, that inventory could be added in addition to what was estimated in the market analysis. But there's also a strategy for when you're positioning a downtown to create that authenticity that comes with locally owned businesses. And 20, 30 years ago, there was a trend of building new regional shopping centers in downtowns to try to compete with the suburban shopping centers. And there were lessons learned from that experience, some positive, but also some hard lessons learned about doing that. And one of the lessons learned was that the consumers, when coming to a downtown environment, whether they're visitors or whether they're regional residents, they come to that environment because they want something different than what they can get out in the suburbs. They want something that is either unique or, if you're a visitor, that's authentic of that region. You can see all the chains back home in your own place. So wanting to look at what's authentic. So that's an important component of a downtown business development strategy. There are different steps cities have taken to try to accommodate the smaller locally owned business. One is in planning to plan capacity or the opportunity to have more space than what you might estimate is supportable by the market under normal metrics. Where I'm from in San Diego, that was a key part of the gas lamp district. Much more commercial space than really people anticipated could be supported when that was first planned and envisioned. The reason is by having a surplus of space, you have some spaces that are lower rent. And that lower rent becomes affordable for incubating new retailers or storefronts or companies in that space. They can afford to be in the location. And often many of those become very successful companies, not just locally, but even beyond the local region. Another is having a strategy, other places where they've cooperatively coordinated a leasing strategy for the downtown commercial district, bringing together property owners, developers, commercial leasing community, the brokerage community, the business association, and the residents to create a strategy and a commitment to lease a percentage of the space to locally owned businesses. It was one of the very important successes of, for example, Quincy Market in Boston. which was one of the first that came in as a commercial development, but their strategy was certain, I think it was 70 or 80, if not more, % of the businesses had to be locally owned. Other cities have used regulation to discourage chains and either limit chains or require a certain discretionary decision-making process to approve chains above a certain size. Santa Barbara State Street's an example of that. Others don't go that far, but instead they regulate in certain portions of the district a maximum tenant size in terms of the space, recognizing that a certain size might discourage and not fit the normal formula of national chains, and so therefore that space tends to go more towards local businesses. Some business associations work on a training and local funding program for small businesses to help them get started with training and some facade improvement assistance on design and funding those improvements so they can then compete and then organize to market those small businesses together. Business improvement districts are often organized to do that, to help take that main street and market it. And finally, another example is co-ops. I know you have a co-op group here. The public market that is mentioned in the plan is often a model used in a co-op where the small businesses own their real estate. And when they own their real estate, they work under a different business model than the normal tenant leasing space from a landlord. So there are different models that would be part of a business development strategy as part of the economic development plan.
So to continue then with Peace Plaza, this is the east end of the Peace Plaza recast to create a beautiful canopy and a welcoming passage that will take you to the waterfront as well as connect to the Skyway system and also flatter the Chateau Theater. And again, we want to extend the energy of Peace Plaza and create more opportunities for those local businesses to really populate the ground floor retail and make a really truly unique Rochester type of place. We also will create ground level passages that are weather controlled so that we don't rely exclusively on subways and skyways and really keep the activity at the street level. As I said earlier, we're using the great architecture that currently exists at the Plummer Building and other areas within the downtown and making it really a focal point within the plan and creating this beautiful portal space on 2nd Street that looks like it was specifically designed for the Plummer Building and making a front door to the Mayo Clinic and to Discovery Square. So that's a good transition to Discovery Square, which is really the focus of a lot of the economic development that we see within the plan. This is 2nd Avenue, looking back to the north towards the Gonda Building and the Plummer Building. Today it's a parking lot, but we see an opportunity for lots of new addresses for science and technology in the city. And so this is the overhead view of Discovery Square. Again, looking north, we see new development all developed around a beautiful urban square that will not only create the address for science and technology and create a global destination for these new companies and businesses to be located, but also a great place for the residents and visitors of Rochester to enjoy as part of an urban experience. We will have architecture that's very adventurous, but also keeping a memory of the past and always featuring the past in everything that we do. The translational cloud will be one of those features that we incorporate within Discovery Square. We'll also build upon the existing Bio-Business Center, and we will grow that and give it even more of a greater presence on 2nd Street and on to Discovery Square. We see Discovery Square being an authentic urban place, much like Union Square in San Francisco, where just normal urban life occurs there, but also creates this wonderful address for economic development and science right at the doorstep of the Mayo Clinic. So this is an overhead plan view of what Discovery Square would look like. We've taken what was once a parking lot, we've made a beautiful urban square, we've provided automobile access and streets all around all 4 sides. We've created development parcels all around that beautiful square so that we can locate the new lab building buildings, the new science buildings, the new science and biotech buildings will have their addresses on that space, and it'll all be woven into the fabric and structure of the downtown street system. And this is a ground level view of what Discovery Square will look like. Again, we're going to make it very exciting architecture, very forward-thinking architecture, but at the same time, always a nod to the past, always a feature to the past to show that inspiration and continuity through all of the designs. Another place that we've created is the downtown waterfront, a new neighborhood that we're calling the Gardens. We want to build off the natural features of the downtown Zumbro River, as well as the open space amenities that currently exist. There's a beautiful opportunity here to finally, for the first time, connect the downtown to the waterfront. And we've created a very exciting, bold plan that takes all of the land that surrounds the bend at the Zumbro River, right at the foot of 2nd Street, and integrates all of those parcels in a way that really embraces the waterfront, reflects the bend in the river, incorporates other water elements so that you see water when you look down 2nd Street. There's been a lot of commentary about how the river is hidden from view by the walls and because the water is lower, and we've found ways that we can create additional water elements that look like they're connected to the river, but they're up at the city level, so we really reinforce and extend the river presence within the downtown. This is the existing intersection of 2nd Street and Civic Center Drive, and it's really just all pavement right now, and this is really that spot where the city really truly meets the waterfront, and this is where we see the greatest opportunity to make something happen here. In Providence, Rhode Island, they've taken their river and they've made it a water town square, and it's totally transformed downtown Providence. In Buffalo, we're doing the same thing. We're actually creating new canals that look like they're an extension of the Buffalo River, taking a memory for the Erie Canal where it started there at the Lake Erie and the Buffalo River, and creating new water environments that extend the river environment. And then this plan also currently shows an option where the library is relocated within the downtown plan. And the reason we've looked at this is in our looking at the waterfront and looking at the opportunity around the waterfront, we understand that the library is looking to expand and grow, and we see an opportunity to marry that aspiration with an opportunity to create more space, more public space at the riverfront, and still incorporate the library within the overall downtown plan. The actual design and location and plan for the library is to be determined, but we think there's an opportunity for the library to have an even better way to expand their programs and at the same time create a great new public space right at the foot of 2nd Street and the Zumbro River. So this is the overhead view, and where you see the space called Waterfront Square. That is currently where the library is located, and we're showing how we've taken 2nd Street and we've created a gentle curve in 2nd Street to reflect the bend in the Zumbro River, and then we've also used the railroad spur that will be repurposed as the Crescent, and there'll be many cultural venues and amenities that will really anchor that as a great new urban neighborhood. We've incorporated the Zumbro Market right adjacent to that railroad spur, where we'll have a farmer's market and gourmet shops and restaurants that really create an attraction to the downtown. You see also in this plan, the Civic Center has expanded into the oval right at the front door of the Civic Center, and so it actually feels like it's closer to the downtown, and we've created a beautiful new setting for visitors to see out to the water as they come to the Civic Center, and have many amenities to utilize there, as well as for residents to gather and really create a waterfront square that belongs to the entire city. This is the type of market that we think we can create there. It's a farmer's market, but also has restaurants and other amenities that really will anchor the downtown gardens as a residential neighborhood. This is an overhead view looking to the southeast. 2nd Street is the curving street that you see on the left-hand side. The Zumbro Market is on the right-hand side. That's currently a parking structure that's at the end of its useful life. And so we think that would be a great location to have the market be a real anchor to this neighborhood. You see the water has been brought up to the city level and really is sort of now the terminus to 2nd Street. We've also repositioned the Skyway in a way that it embraces the water and really integrates the waterfront, the Civic Center, and other development within the heart of the downtown. So there's been a lot of questions on how we've recognized and incorporated historic fabric, and I will say if you look closely at our plans, we've really, I think, reinforced all the historic gems that currently exist within the downtown, and as the waterfront is concerned, we have historic 3rd Street, which is just right there within our plan, and we like the small scale of the historic buildings. We like the memory, the tradition, and the culture that they represent. We also like the local businesses that usually inhabit those storefronts. And so that will be a big part of the plan, not only in the waterfront, but in all areas within the downtown. And again, I think if you look at our plans more closely as they come out, you'll see that we've taken great care to really reinforce those historic elements so that we build a real full, beautiful downtown that it has history and new together. There's also a lot of questions about affordable housing and how we'll integrate that in the plan, and I'll use the downtown waterfront, the gardens, as a way to explain our strategy. We will have a full range of price points and a full range of mix of housing types throughout the plan. This is a view of the gardens along the Crescent, and you see low-rise townhouses, you see mid-rise buildings, you see some taller buildings. There'll be a full range of housing types, housing price points, so that we will have a very inclusive and diverse community that inhabits the downtown, so we can attract the best and brightest from really all over the world, as well as to provide for the residents that currently exist in Rochester that want to take in the downtown and make the downtown their home. And so we'll incorporate that in the Gardens District, but also in all of the areas of our plan. We also focus on sustainability, and people have asked a lot of questions about how sustainability will be integrated into the plan. And again, using the Gardens District as one example, again, we do have a sustainability framework that has been utilized and established throughout the entire plan. In the Gardens District, we have those water elements that, just as one of the features, will collect rainwater, will filter the rainwater and use it for other purposes of irrigation and make the water cleaner and make the environment more integrated with nature, among other strategies and elements that will include in a very full sustainability framework. Again, not just for the downtown waterfront and the gardens, but throughout the entire plan. The sustainability framework includes many components. It's not just about solar panels or windmills, but it's really a full lifestyle change that we want to propose for the downtown and make Rochester really a model for sustainability and keep those elements as part of all the new development projects that we show within the master plan. So this is an overhead view of the future waterfront square. This is looking to the west down 2nd Street. And as I said, 2nd Street for the first time now, you'll see water at the end of 2nd Street. We have lively uses all around the water edges. We've incorporated new public spaces, restaurants, cultural venues, landscaping, and really make it a place that will attract visitors and residents and really be a beautiful sort of postcard view of how Rochester created its authentic downtown waterfront. And then, of course, for days like today, we will make sure that the design is done in a way that we have winter programming. We're showing here that how the water at the foot of 2nd Street can be turned into a beautiful ice sheet, and we can have the giant Christmas tree by the convention center and other displays and elements that really make this a place that people will want to be in the wintertime, even when it is cold outside. So we've tried to make this something that really appeals and reflects the climate and the fabric of the city. The next place is called Central Station, and this was an opportunity for us to take advantage of Central Park, which was an amenity that's sort of hidden in plain sight. The existing park is a beautiful oasis, and there's plans to redevelop the park, and we want to make that part of the arrival experience that people have when they come into the city. There's empty lots that are up by the railroad tracks that we think we can develop some transit amenities, some parking amenities, so that we take the cars and the buses off the streets and put them up by the railroad tracks, but then use Central Park as really the front door and the first thing that people see when they come into the city. Instead of seeing a parking garage or seeing a highway, they see a beautiful green square. And the wonderful opportunity that we have here, not only just with the park, but its location, it's really within very close walking distance to the downtown. So even though you'll hear later, Tom will talk about the transit facilities and the circulator that we're proposing for the downtown, this location on a nice day is also just 2 blocks away from the Methodist Hospital, 3 blocks away from Gonda Building and other destinations within the downtown, so you can actually walk as one of your choices to arrive into work, and walk past a beautiful square as you come into the city. One of the final places that I'll talk about is St. Mary's Place. And when we first looked at St. Mary's and thought how disconnected it was from the downtown, yet it's also one of the first things that you see when you come to the city. We saw those characteristics as a way to create a great new place that connected the campus to the downtown, and at the same time create a positive first impression as people arrive. We talked about how the highway architecture as you come off of 52 does not say anything about the culture and the excellence that Rochester represents. We think we can create something that's really much more dignified and reflective. This is Water Tower Place, and we compared Michigan Avenue to 2nd Street. They're very different streets, but the length of the street is very similar. And Water Tower Place does something remarkable. It not only sort of creates a wonderful pedestrian atmosphere for the street, but it sort of divides the street and makes it feel smaller and more pedestrian. And we think we can use that opportunity here at St. Mary's. So this is a view looking to the south at St. Mary's Park. You see there's open parking fields all around this intersection. The park is up on a bluff, disconnected really from the whole neighborhood, and so we see a great opportunity to leverage that existing park and create a more positive arrival experience. It's really an asset within the downtown. You go up at the top of the park and beautiful landscape, and you get beautiful views looking over the city. So we want to connect that opportunity to a much greater part of the downtown population by creating a grand stair that connects up to St. Mary's Park, also providing elevator access in all parts of our plan. So we have complete ADA access, but also creating a more positive arrival experience as people come into the city. So this is an overhead view of how that space might lay out. You see on the left-hand side of the screen, the St. Mary's Hospital campus. And then we've taken a space right in the middle of 2nd Street and made that the sort of arrival space that people will see when they come into the city. It will also have a transit streetcar station, so we'll connect the St. Mary's campus to the downtown. And by locating this with St. Mary's Park, not only do we get the benefit of connecting the park to the neighborhoods that surround this area, but we also give the impression that St. Mary's is much more connected to the downtown. We've actually sort of moved the front door of St. Mary's about a quarter of a mile further east and making it more connected to the overall city. So this is an overhead view of what that might look like. Again, we would make a connection up to the park with a stair, but also provide elevator access for ADA, and so everyone can get to the park and move freely about the space. The scale of development will be low scale. It'll feel more like a hometown arrival, really reflecting that attribute of Rochester that is really valuable, and that is we have a hometown that really reflects a great address for Mayo. And so that will be the first impression people have. So in conclusion, we see a city of opportunity, a totally integrated development, connecting the waterfront to the downtown, enhancing the city with a series of great public spaces, and creating a great place for people to both live and work within the heart of downtown Rochester. So Tom's going to talk about the, sorry about that. Tom's going to talk about the transportation plan.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, Rochester. So transportation is a key element of helping to realize this great, exciting, and I think very realistic vision. Transportation, as Lisa mentioned, is something that really supports all the aspects of what we're trying to create here, a fantastic, livable, healthy, vibrant community. So we've taken some of the questions that we've been hearing and hope to answer some of those as we talk a little bit about the transportation plan. So one of the things we recognize with this exciting initiative is that it means we're going to be bringing a lot more people into what's already a very job-rich downtown. So this is a pretty geeky slide for a public presentation, but I'm asking you to look at it for a minute. And what we're doing essentially is comparing Rochester today, the pink bar on the left, and Rochester with the completion of DMC, the pink bars on the right, to some other much larger cities around the country. And what we see is the number of jobs that are in the downtown, the central business district, here is already very comparable to a lot of big cities. And if we achieve what we're talking about here, maybe 30,000 new employees in the downtown, we'll really be kind of off the charts. And not only that, but the relationship to the number of jobs to actual working age population in the city is very different than what you see in many, many metro areas. So what's that mean for Rochester? Well, it means more of what you already see today, a lot of people coming from quite a long distance to get to the job core that is downtown Rochester. So we're going to be bringing people from afar, as well as hopefully bringing a lot more people from close by, people who can walk from the exciting new neighborhoods Peter talked about. We also need to recognize that the workforce of tomorrow looks a little different than the generation that a lot of us in this room represent. So the Mayo Clinic, the average hiring age at the Mayo Clinic is 31. So that means over the next 20 years, if we're filling 30,000 new jobs at the Mayo and overall downtown, we're talking about a lot of people that are in college today, some people that are in high school, maybe even a few people that are in elementary school right now. And one of the things we're seeing as we work around the country is that there's been probably the most dramatic generational shift in the last 50 years, maybe more, in terms of how people move, what their desires for transportation are. And a lot of that is driven by technology. Young people are interested in smartphones. They're not so interested in driving these days. So what they want is options. They want transit. They want shared cars. They want bikes. And these are things that we need to provide here to succeed. So as we look at Rochester today, you already do pretty well in getting people downtown by transit. You got a pretty good rate of walking and biking for a city your size. A lot of people carpool, much higher than the average national rate. About 70% of people still drive alone. That's good for today, but as we see this type of growth, we can't continue at that rate of mode share. We've done analysis, and that shows us if we kept a 70% drive alone mode share to downtown, and we accommodated that through surface parking, we basically take up the whole downtown. If we built 6 or 7 story parking garages, we'd eat up 8 or 9 whole blocks of the downtown probably with surface parking. If we try to put it all in one ramp, we'd be 101 stories in the sky. So pretty inconvenient if you're on the top deck. And one thing we've really heard a lot from the community is we don't want our downtown to look like this. We've got too many single-use parking garages downtown already today. What we're trying to create is a place that looks like this with wonderful streets, with great pedestrian spaces like you see in Boulder on the right. We want a people-focused downtown. That doesn't mean we won't provide parking. We just need to be smart about how we size and design that parking. So one thing we've done through this plan is recognize where we need to get to in terms of a future mode share. So as we look out to 2035, we know we need to get that drive-alone mode share down to about 50%. So we'll expect more people to be walking as we build compact urban neighborhoods and move people downtown. We hope more people will take transit. It's really imperative that we continue to improve the transit system. So we need to get at least to that 50% auto mode share if we want to keep the system working, keep the major intersections into downtown from becoming overly congested. But we hope we can even do better that and create more space for the great places that Peter's talking about. One of the things I want to emphasize, though, people ask us, well, I'm not going to take transit. I'm not going to take transit when I come downtown to eat at night. And when we talk about mode shift, we're really talking about commuters and the peak travel periods. We're assuming that a lot of people will continue to drive, and they'll have to drive. Patients coming to town are going to drive downtown to get close to where they want to go. Visitors, both local visitors and retail customers, we expect that they'll mostly drive downtown, and we need to make that experience convenient, affordable, and reasonable for them. And 50% of commuters will likely continue to drive. The people we're really talking about changing behavior for are the day-to-day commuters, the 9 to 5, the 8 to 4 kind of folks who have good options and conveniently can use other modes, and maybe long-term visitors and people that are looking for cheaper options as well. So we've talked a lot about transit, and we've gotten questions, why is transit such a focus of this plan? And it's those reasons, we know we need to change that behavior. And we want to talk a little bit about what transit really is too. So you've got great transit here, you've got regional express buses, you've got the public transit system here, which is very productive. You've got remote park and ride services that many commuters use. But when we think about what transit really brings to a community, it's more than just those basic commute service. It's what keeps traffic moving too. So even if you're one of those people who says, I'm never going to get on transit, there's good reason to support transit if you want to make your drive downtown easy and convenient on a day-to-day basis. Those people who are getting on the bus are doing you a favor, keeping the road system working. It allows taxable development. The great development that Peter's talking about creates tax base. We're not taking out parking space and building great buildings, builds community, but it also keeps the city running through taxable development. And it really helps to create the great pedestrian streets and places Peter was talking about. So we're looking at a challenge of bringing people not just from Rochester and the suburbs of Rochester, but really from all over the region, far side of the Twin Cities, neighboring states. And we want to capture them on buses to come in. We want to capture them at the remote park and rides around the edge of the community. We want to capture them at the periphery of downtown too. So we want to give people options that work for them. As we look to the out years of the plan, we're expecting transit ridership to triple, maybe more. 19,000 to 28,000 new daily transit trips into the downtown, as many as 100 new commuter coaches daily coming into the city. We really want to invest in a permanent, high-quality park and ride system with park and rides at the edge of the community, and hopefully park and rides that are more than just commercial parking lots or a Walmart parking lot, but places that are really neighborhood mobility centers where you can ride your bike on a nice day, or you can walk to a center where you've got a comfortable wait for a bus that comes frequently and comes into the late hours of the evening as well. We're looking at larger vehicles to make those rides comfortable. And in the downtown, as Peter mentioned, we're looking at a new mobility tool that's both a way to get around downtown, but also a way to connect peripheral parking facilities at the edge of downtown and create park once mobility. The east-west alignment is the one we want to focus on building initially. The north-south component we think could come later as development around the Central Station and Discovery Square area comes online. This is a modern electric transit that we're seeing built in cities of all sizes around the US and certainly very popular in mid-sized cities in Europe. Provides a great level of accessibility and stable ride quality, something we don't see on bus transit. It's great for people in wheelchairs, people who have mobility problems, people with strollers. Much more comfortable type of transit. It's one that's been shown to really activate business. Tucson opened a streetcar just earlier this year. And this summer they've seen business activity along the streetcar line more than double. And many people have asked us, can we really do this here in Rochester? Come on. We're not that big a city. We're not Seattle. We're not Portland. But as we look at the numbers, the amount of people simply riding a shuttle between Mayo downtown and St. Mary's already exceeds the number of people that are using the South Lake Union streetcar in Seattle on a daily basis. And that's just one piece of the market that we're talking about. So we think the demand's already there today. You're already investing a lot of resource in that corridor. We can harvest that to make a better public transit service that's fast, that's reliable. The other thing we want to focus on is making sure as the city grows, as congestion increases, that's a reliable path for all the bus transit coming into and through downtown, getting people to employment sites and getting people to the new central station location. So we're talking a lot about transit priority streets, creating transit lanes, creating great places for people along with efficient transit facilities. That means new high-end facilities with good information, heated shelters like you have on 2nd Street now to keep people comfortable in the cold weather. We've got a lot of questions about how the street system changes under this plan. We've had a lot of ideas floating around, so I think people want some clarity around what's really going to be different about the downtown streets. So these are the streets that the DMC plan has investment in over the next 20 years, and I want to focus on a couple that are of higher priority and probably likely to happen sooner. One being Broadway. This is a corridor that really was the historic Main Street, the highway through street for many years. It's got great historic bones along it, but it's a place that's kind of doesn't feel safe to cross and doesn't feel great to be along either. So we want to slow it down. We want to make it safer. We expect it's still going to carry a lot of traffic. We're not reducing traffic lanes, but we're tightening up the street, making better pedestrian spaces, eliminating some turn movement. So like at 2nd and 2nd, you can actually cross the street from the great space of the portal Peter talked about to the new waterfront district without feeling threatened by turning traffic. As we see around the country, these types of investments in great main streets really pay dividends in terms of jobs and attracting local businesses. Civic Center Drive in front of the convention center, in front of where we are here, is a street we really feel is overbuilt. There's just too much pavement out there. It's not comfortable from a pedestrian standpoint today and certainly won't be conducive to the type of environment Peter talked about earlier. So we want to tighten that street up. It'll still carry about as much traffic as it does today, but it becomes a much better place for pedestrians. Could see different types of treatments that still allow auto traffic, but really emphasize the quality of pedestrian space like these streets in Indianapolis and St. Louis. 2nd Street between the 3rd, 4th couplet and the waterfront district. Again, this is a street we expect to see probably some of the most transformational change. It connects really two of the great neighborhoods of the city and two of the great pedestrian-oriented districts. So we'll have transit at the center of that street, rail transit, which is very predictable for people on foot. We will lose a travel lane there, so we actually see traffic going down, but putting more emphasis on the pedestrian environment. This is an example of Main Street in Houston, where they've taken a transit project, a similar transit project, and done some great streetscape work. And you can see they've really transformed the quality of this street, not the kind of place you'd expect to see in a city like Houston. And then a couple other streets that will be focused on: 2nd Ave Southwest, south of 2nd Street, and 1st Street as a continuation of the Peace Plaza across Broadway are both streets that we look at as what we'd call shared streets. So they still allow traffic, but have a very strong pedestrian orientation to them. Places like Stevens Avenue Walk in Calgary, or this street, which is a festival street in Seattle. Traffic and buses still move through that street, but it's very oriented towards pedestrians and local business. So many people have asked us, well, where did the traffic go with the proposed changes? Well, in actuality, we're not changing a lot of actual through capacity on the system, with the exception of 2nd Street potentially, where we may lose a lane for traffic in order to move a lot more people. Things don't change all that much. There's a huge amount of land use growth, so the DMC is creating more traffic in the system overall, about 28% more trips over a non-DMC scenario in 2040. But with the transit plan and with some of the other things we have in place, that number goes down quite a bit. So you're only seeing about a 19% growth in traffic, which given the amount of development is actually pretty reasonable. I don't expect people to really digest this fully, but it's just to say one of the things we have done is a lot of detailed traffic modeling to look at how these changes impact the quality of people's experience at various intersections. And generally where we're seeing green, that's a very excellent level of operation. Means you wouldn't see too much delay. The yellow and orange intersections, that's a pretty typical level of urban delay, probably a little more than you might see in Rochester today, but something that's very acceptable in most major cities or bigger cities around the country. We've heard a lot of interest in the community in active transportation. How's this plan going to help make us as Rochester citizens, as well as people who come here to visit, more active, more able to access the great open spaces that we have at the periphery of downtown? How can this really help us make Rochester a better place where our streets are really designed for people, so we can see these kind of great street life environments like we see in Strasburg? And the other thing we know is, as we talk about this challenge of attracting many new employees to Rochester, we're seeing that college grads are much more interested in living in walkable urban environments, as many as 77% of them saying that's where they want to be when they graduate from college. And we're seeing certainly price premiums as well on real estate in walkable urban neighborhoods. And again, we're seeing that there's pretty clear correlation between high levels of education and strong GDP, people's earnings, in cities that are more walkable. So as you look at that trend line there, those are cities around the US, and the ones in green at the upper right are the more walkable places. So there's a strong correlation there. One of the things that we want to do, I think one of the more exciting things in the plan, is create what we're calling the city loop, which is really a ring around the downtown connecting to your fantastic trail system, which comes to the edges of downtown but doesn't really penetrate the downtown, as well as a north-south connector through the heart of the downtown and the employment core, linking all these neighborhoods. It's really the only thing in the plan that links each of these individual neighborhoods and great experiences. And it does so by creating a fantastic multi-use facility that's built with great materials, that's well designed, that's nicely landscaped, much in line with the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, which some of you may be familiar with. A facility that they've built over the last 10 years has really been transformational for the city of Indianapolis in bringing people back to the street and driving economic development as well. They've seen and been able to link directly a tremendous amount of job creation, as well as over $640 million in economic development to that trail, which allows people to connect to their best neighborhoods and cultural amenities on foot and by bike. So that's a little bit about the transportation plan, and we'll answer some more questions in a little bit after Amy speaks.
So we've seen a lot of really interesting ideas and concepts and pictures, and Amy and I are just so eager to show you lots of numbers. So I think both she and I have agreed that we're going to go pretty quickly through our presentations here, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask us in the Q&A session or afterwards. We at AECOM also looked at the economic impacts of this development as well as the fiscal impacts, and we just want to go pretty quickly here. The one thing that Lisa always has a really good she's really great at reminding us that this is an economic development initiative, and what I just want to remind us is bring us right back to that and tell you that we've tried to measure that for you. We're going to provide just a small, real quick baseline of what's going on, how strong the economy is here today, and then of course the DMC program, what it would do is enhance that. And so this is measured through economic impacts. We'll do two different types. We'll look at the construction impacts, which are significant. We've already heard about $6 billion of investment. And then we'll look at the ongoing operations, and these are the buildings once they're open and they're active, what's being generated there in the economy. The fiscal impacts are essentially the tax revenues that'll be generated as a result. And we'll look at that for the city of Rochester as well as the county. Your economy is strong. You have a large driver here with the Mayo Clinic. They support a lot of jobs, a lot of industry, and your unemployment during the national recession has fared fairly well compared to other cities and compared nationally through the recession. Economic impacts, essentially, we're looking at how money circulates throughout the economy after an initial investment. This is either the construction or the opening of a business. Those are the direct impacts. The indirect and induced impacts come after that. And so the indirect impacts are when you go to a restaurant and you spend $100, And the restaurateur then has to go and buy food and alcohol and glassware and plates and silverware and pay for linens and things like that, everything that's needed in order to supply that sale. Those are the indirect impacts. The indirect impacts occur when the restaurateur pays their employees wages, and that employee then goes into the economy and spends it. We'll show this in terms of output, jobs, and then wages. This is the program by phase. This is a very detailed table. Peter provided you the concepts. This is over time, the different types of uses that will be that are being proposed. Again, I'm just going to caution you that the results are based on this analysis. This is a single scenario of what may happen in the DMC over 20 years. I'm not that good at predicting the future. It could happen faster, smaller, bigger, a little bit different. If they do, the economic impacts will also be slightly different. Here's the construction impacts. These are, this is a summary of the 5 years. Each phase is 5 years long. We said earlier that it's a $5.9 billion impact over those 20 years. This in turn generates an $8.3 billion impact within the area. Again, that includes the indirect and induced impacts that are supporting the construction over these 20 years, if developed as proposed. The annual employment here, instead of a 5-year impact, we're looking at an average annual impact within each one of these phases, because construction jobs don't necessarily end. They can continue throughout the project, move to other projects, et cetera. And this, in the first year, we're looking at almost 1,100 construction jobs in the first phase on average each of those 5 years, which would in turn support 630 other jobs throughout the region. The ongoing operations, when the business is open, what's being generated here? But then these are cumulative. I want to emphasize that. If a business opens in the first year, we're assuming it's also open in year 20. So those impacts occur 20 years over the life of the program. We estimate for this proposed development, it's $47 billion over 20 years. That in turn has an economic impact of $68 billion towards the region. It's big. The employment impacts. We've heard a lot about the number of jobs that are being created here. This is the total number of jobs. So it's the direct jobs. These are the jobs in the biomedical tech space. They're the jobs being created in the clinic, the hotels, the restaurants. It's also those indirect and induced jobs that are resulting from those impacts. In the first year, we're looking at about 1,000 workers coming into the DMC and supporting those efforts. And by year 20, again, this is cumulative. Those people working in year 1, those jobs exist also in year 20. It's nearly 52,000 jobs being created here throughout the region. Fiscal impacts, this is just a fancy way of saying taxes. We worked very closely with the city of Rochester, and we wanted to understand their budget, particularly their general fund. We wanted to look at the taxes that are being collected as a result of the DMC being built and how the city and the county will benefit from that in terms of the different types of taxes. Under our proposed scenario for the DMC, there could be an estimated $279 million to Rochester over this 20-year period. And these are those 3 taxes. It's the hotel tax, it's property tax, and it's sales tax. And again, this is a single scenario, and if anything changes, we know that the politics often drive how taxes are set here in Minnesota, and if those change and the sales tax is revoked for whatever reason or increased for some reason, that of course will change the amount of revenue that's potential. In addition to getting new revenues, there's also costs, and we spent considerable time, as I said, with the city, looking really very closely at the 3 different groups that are part of the DMC. People who will live here, residents, people who will work here, and visitors. And we're looking at both what their service needs are from the city, as well as, of course, the taxes that they're generating and the expenditures. So over the 20-year period, we did show through the general fund that there's a modest annual surplus, and so the DMC is actually a small benefit to the general fund. And again, this is based on the current political and economic conditions, and if those shift, this line will also shift. For the county, we estimate that the proposed DMC could generate $230 million over the 20 years, and again, this is a property tax and a sales tax. So I know I moved very quickly, but I just wanted to emphasize, I hope your takeaway is that as an economic development initiative, the proposed DMC certainly will work. So now I'll introduce you to Amy.
Hi, everyone. We want to move relatively quickly here because we want to leave enough time for questions. So I'm going to go really fast, but I'm happy to answer any questions after the fact, and we'll be available at the back of the room as well. So the first thing we wanted to talk to you about was the district. Back in September, we introduced to you the concept of the district and why we had selected the area boundary that we did, which largely had to do with it is the area that, by the city's estimations, by Mayo's estimations, and by our own analysis, is the area of the greatest growth potential and the area where the highest need exists for transit demand, or pardon me, for demand of development. The original boundary that we put out in public and asked for input on is shown on the red lines, with the exception of where the clouds are, and that's where some changes were made. Those changes were made as a result of public input that we got from all of you, as well as discussions with the city as the plans have advanced and we've thought about different areas, as well as discussions with the boards. So for instance, today, the two boards were saying that it made sense to do the north and south loops of this, extending the boundary along Broadway, because that is a gateway to this city. And we should think of Broadway as a gateway to the city, and we should extend to look at the entire downtown and those primary entry points. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm gonna keep moving quickly. One thing about the boundary that you should know is that it's not permanent necessarily. It can be changed. In fact, you can have more than one boundary. So if we find over time that in fact development wants to occur in other areas, if we find projects are deemed to be really important to the strategies going forward, we can review the area that is included in the boundary and even create new districts so that the DMC funding can be channeled to the highest best use. And some examples of that are things like if we do an expansion of the sewer lines to handle growth in the downtown area, we're going to have to connect to the main line. So you may extend the boundary in order to accommodate that. There are other improvements that are outside of the district. The mayor asked today, what about Cascade Lake? There's a big parking lot out there. There's improvements that are being considered out there. And what we have said is, as projects advance, what we want to see happen is that those projects would come forward with a proposal to change the area, and then that can all be reviewed at the same time. The funding model itself is based on $585 million of funding that is broken into two categories. The first category is public infrastructure funding, which is, general state aid funding, which is $455 million, and approximately $128 million of that comes from the city. The second piece of the funding is the state transit aid, $116 million, or approximately $47 million from the county. The third piece is a sales tax exemption on construction materials, which is $14 million. The reason why I said initially it was two phases is we're looking at this in two ways. We're looking at transit improvements as sort of one piece of the puzzle here, and we're looking at public infrastructure improvements as the other piece of the puzzle. The transit funds are distinct to that strategy and are distinct in the legislation. That $116 million needs to go into transit improvements and transportation improvements. And so that is why we broke it up that way. When I talk about public infrastructure funding, I want to be clear. What we're talking about under the law in public infrastructure as public infrastructure is a broadly defined term. And the reason for that is we need to do all the support infrastructure, the sewers, the streets, the lights, those sorts of things. We need to look at those improvements as growth improvements, things that support growth in the downtown. But we also need to look at the economic development initiative that we're doing. And so we are So we have defined this broadly to allow for money to flow into economic development initiatives, into strategies. So Peter went through the 6 districts. Those 6 districts are strategies unto themselves, and you need to think about, you know, what projects, what catalytic things need to happen in order for the improvements to be made. The funding model works off of development projects, and so AECOM mentioned they did a program model. That program model translates into an investment model. So basically, as development occurs, private investment is made, and then the funding comes through the legislative, in the legislative, the funding is, the available funding is measured by a formula which determines how much state aid is available in any given year. Then what happens is there's other things that determine how much funding is available. So there's caps on the high end for how much state funding you could take down in any year. But then there's also a requirement that there's a matching fund. So for instance, to get to the absolute maximum cap of state funding, you have to get to of 30 million. The city has to invest 11.7 million in public infrastructure dollars per year. And so those two things need to happen together in order to get to this, to get to the formula. And so what we've done is we've worked with city staff to identify how much funding we think would be available in any year based on our modeling and on an estimation of available funds, and then tried to phase out how much would come through the model over the 20-year period, really looking at these 5 phases as distinct units. And one thing that's important is a lot of people say the 585, you know, a lot of people think the 585 is immediately available. It's not. In the first 5 years, we estimate, based on this formula, that we will have 40 to 60 million in public infrastructure dollars, and we will have 10 to 15 million in transit infrastructure dollars. So that's a lot of money. But when we look at this vision and this aspirational plan, and you begin to think about how will that money be spent, you really need to start to think about choices. Strategically, what's most important? How do you advance the vision and the strategies that are in the plan? How do you support growth through infrastructure investments? Where do you start with transit? Those are the questions that you'll all be asking now and well into the future as you consider the financial framework of the project. And a lot of people think we'll have a perfect answer at the end of the development plan process, and the answer, and the reality is we won't. What we are putting together is a framework. We're putting together a strategy, and we're putting together an implementation plan that says this is how you can get to the place that we show on the pictures that Peter has indicated. But it's really up to all of you. It's up to your city council. It's up to the DMCC board how to channel that. So you all have been incredibly participatory in this process of the development plan and have shaped it. I mean, really have shaped it in a way that we haven't seen, a lot of us haven't seen in other communities. Well, going forward, you will have the chance to shape the projects. You'll have the chance to weigh in. You'll have the chance to shape those strategies and determine what's most important to you to determine how your city will look now and in the future. And what we're proposing to help those decisions be made is to set up evaluation criteria. And again, I'm going really fast. But the evaluation criteria that we have proposed is a means of standardizing an evaluation across projects. So how do you look at a transit project and a cultural project and a utility project and a catalytic development and really test those things all against the same criterion to understand, you know, what decisions need to be made, and are we moving in the same direction, and frankly, are we being fair in our evaluation of these things? So what we proposed to the boards today was that we would establish this criteria, that it would become part of the planning process, and that it would essentially result in a staff report that the EDA would generate that would help the DMCC board and the city council, if they so choose, to evaluate these projects on the standardized basis. And what are those criteria? First is Established priorities, do they meet established priorities in each phase based on economic drivers? We really need this plan to result in the economic results that we've talked about. So we need to look at, is it matching the strategies? Is it catalytic? Is it supportive? And we need to define projects by that. But it's not all just about economics. We also have to find if it's consistent with the plan. And so we have to look at our goals and objectives. And our goals and objectives, a lot of them are economic, but a lot of them are about workforce, and a lot of them are about quality of life, and a lot of them are about culture. And so this basis, this consistency finding says, we set a vision, we set a strategy, and we set planning guidelines, and how consistent is this project with what we said we were going to do? We have a finance plan and a gap analysis, which determines if a project is financially viable, if it's operationally sustainable, because one thing we really don't want to do, and your city and county leaders have been just adamant about this, and we totally agree. We cannot put a bunch of improvements in this town and then hope you can all afford them later and not know that you can afford them later. That is critically important in this. And so as projects are evaluated, they should have to come forward and explain how they will be economically viable in the long term. And then we have to demonstrate there's a gap. This is really gap financing, and it should go towards projects that really need funding because you have a finite amount of money. The balance of the criteria are, does it realize a fiscal benefit? Does it leverage other funds? Does it turn $585 million into $5 billion of development? What conditions might be included? Entitlements, requirements like targeted business, and policy requirements. And then finally, if the boundary is changed, there should be a good reason to do that. The project should really be evaluated in terms of, does it tie back to the strategy in some way, and is it catalytic and essential to achieving the goals that are adopted in the plan? So again, I'm happy to answer any questions related to this. The last thing we wanted to talk about is we get a lot of questions about, okay, what's next? You all are racing to the finish here, which I'm sure doesn't feel like a race to any of you, but it does to all of us. You're racing to the finish here. On December 17th, we will be back. We will be submitting the plan. And then it goes into a formal review process. And what the DMCC and the EDA boards discussed today was, in fact, giving the plan an extra 30 days of review. So we'll submit it to the DMCC board. They will hold it and have some discussions about what they saw, and then it will be formally submitted to the city to enter the review process in January. It will then go through a 60-day process at the city where there will be public hearings. There will be a plan commission meeting, I believe, in early March, and then a common council hearing in late March, where again, you will all have the chance to weigh in on the plan. Once that is set and the plan is set, as I mentioned earlier, projects will begin to come forward. There will be an application process that will go through the that will go through the EDA. Projects will come forward first to the DMC board. Importantly, the EDA doesn't make any decisions. The EDA is simply staff. So projects will come forward to the DMCC board. They'll be evaluated based on the criteria we just talked about. Then they'll go to the city council. So this project, all of these projects have a checks and balance. This whole process has a checks and balance. So the DMCC board can guide decisions based on the goals and objectives that were set by the state legislature, and the city can weigh in based on your ordinances, your entitlements, the direction of your city that's outlined in the comp plan. So there's a good checks and balances going forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being patient. We're going to take some questions now from you. I hope we have all of the answers, and if we don't, we'll make sure you get those. We also have boards back here, and the planners will be back here after the Q&A session so that you can ask your questions directly to the planners if you're interested in that. And it looks like we have roaming mics, so we've got a panel of experts up here, and we are happy to take questions. By the way, we inserted questions into the presentation because those are the basic questions we've been hearing.
Hi, I have three short questions. The first one is, I've been someone who's seen heated sidewalks work around the Mayo Clinic, and I know I was told that a city, I think it was Holland, Michigan has it, and I think they're doing it in Minneapolis around Peter's project. I'm just wondering what the odds and the chances are of expanding the heated sidewalks so people don't slip and slide here in Rochester, and we can have it better for both visitors and residents. That's the first question. The second question is, with the library, I noticed you put in concept form where the Zumbro Market is and different other features of Rochester. The library is so important. I'm wondering why conceptually you can't locate the library somewhere. And the third thing is, are you going to expand the skyways and subway systems, and will you allow the library, or propose that the library, if it does move, have a skyway connection?
I'm going to ask the planners to be very brief in your responses as well, and I'm also going to ask the questions from the audience. If you can limit your question to one question per person, we'll try to get through as many as we can, which would be great.
Okay, in terms of the heated sidewalk question, as you saw in our presentation, we have a lot of great public spaces that we're proposing. We are in a cold climate, so as we get into the greater detail and developing of these spaces, certainly heated sidewalks will be something that is part of the consideration in the overall design. We want safe and accessible public spaces throughout the downtown. With regards to the library, the sketch plan that you saw tonight envisions the waterfront square occupying the space where the library is today. We have options that keep the library exactly in the same location, but we saw an opportunity to leverage the need that the library has to expand and grow and marry that with a redevelopment of the whole downtown. So the commitment here is, as the library's plans evolve, its location and its program will be included as part of the downtown plan. I think those were all the questions.
Very.
Yeah. Skyway system, yes. We're going to make the skyway and subway, as you saw in the sketches, much more connected to the street level. We don't want to proliferate those systems, but we do appreciate their benefit and convenience. So we want to use them where they're most needed, but also integrate them with the street level as much as possible.
Just to clarify with respect to the library, we did meet with some of the members of the library board, and they outlined what was most important to them from a siting discussion if we were to consider moving in the future, and that included a subway and skyway connection as well as a convenient location to transit.
A question back here?
Since the last public meeting, the Attorney General has had a different reading of the law, that to get the $585 million dispersed, you'll have to raise $12 billion, not $6. And at the same time, the state legislature has changed hands. So how are you going to approach that, and whether the 585 will actually be there, or it will be half of it?
The Attorney General's opinion really raised a question more than anything else about the law, and it's just unclear in the law. And when you draft laws and you implement legislation, this is not unusual. People think that everything is very clear, and then when it comes forward, you realize people have different interpretations. So what we're going through right now is a clarification to say that this is, in fact, a cumulative analysis and not an annual analysis. And I think the expectation is that that will not be a difficult clarification to make because the intent is clear. The authors of the bill have all written, as well as the legislative leaders have all formally stated that they are, that the intent was a cumulative intent. And so I believe that'll get cleared up very quickly, and we'll be moving forward with the plan.
I'll also add to that that we've always had bipartisan support for this, and so although some changes have happened since the elections, I feel very confident, and our legislators do as well, that the DMC is alive and well once we get through the clarification. Other question?
You mentioned sustainability and livability and wanting to attract people to Rochester. Well, beautiful buildings are not going to be the only component of that. The use of energy is going to be doubled with the doubling of the workforce and with the doubling of the amount of buildings that are downtown. So what kinds of, and LEED, just LEED certified buildings is not going to do it. You need to have a plan for what kind of energy is going to be used, what kind of water resources are going to be used. Are you going to use the newest and the best available technologies so that the quality of the experience of people is going to be enhanced, because no one wants to come to a polluted city.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, we are developing a sustainability framework as part of the overall master plan, and that will evolve and grow and have more detail as we go forward with the implementation of the plan. We are not focusing just on LEED. We're focusing on all aspects of sustainability and how it creates a very livable environment within the downtown. So it's been a theme and an aspiration and a component of the master plan. We've got a consultant that has helped us set up a framework, and that will be part of the overall master plan development.
I just want to add quickly, there are opportunities here with the plan itself is to look at district energy solutions as well that can, looking at buildings as producers of passive energy as well as not just as consumers of energy. There are many good examples at the district level in Vienna, Sydney, and in the United States that we can draw upon.
Nancy Slocum, and my usual stick is heritage preservation, so I'm going to bring two concepts together here. One is heritage preservation, and the other is parking lots. Having grown up here, there were a lot of really beautiful historic buildings that were brought to the ground and are now parking lots. And there's two things. I'd like to preserve what we have left of our historic buildings and of the history of our town. And the other part is, has anybody talked to Mayo and asked them? It seems to me that this town could have changed, could have done a great deal had we had access to all the land that's represented in parking lots. We wouldn't be expanding so far out into our neighborhoods. How does Mayo feel about all this?
Nancy, I can answer the Mayo question. Mayo's very involved in this, and I think I can speak on behalf of the planners as well, that historical preservation is a critical component to this planning. You're preaching to the choir in this group in terms of making sure that we preserve our heritage. And also, even the building or the communities that we went to visit, the old and the new together is just a beautiful part of any vibrant community or city. And so we all actually agree that that's a very important component to this planning. And I think you've seen that, and we've visited with your groups as well throughout all of this, because, and I think you'll continue to see it. And Mayo's been a part of the planning right along with us. So thank you. A question back here?
Yes, I'd just like to return to the energy theme for a second. I'm sure you all are working regularly with the City Council, and I would just mention that the City Council has brought forward the idea of a Rochester Energy Commission, and recent data from them and their estimates seem to show that about 2/3 of the energy consumption in the Rochester area is by commercial and industrial building use. So I assume that as you go forward with your plan, you will have a very detailed description of how you plan to meet state goals and minimize the impact on the environment. And could you also comment on your relationship with the City Council and the Rochester Energy Commission? Thanks.
Again, the sustainability plan is a framework that's part of the DMC plan, and we'll work with the city to see what kind of rules and guidelines can be established with the city in terms of new development and how we can use DMC funding to encourage more sustainable and energy efficient practices, as well as just the plan itself really embodies a whole sustainable ethic with a focus on transit, a focus on pedestrian circulation, orienting buildings so that they provide greater daylight within the downtown and avoid the harsh winter winds. All of those elements have been thought about and are integrated in the plan, and the plan will, again, establish a framework to work with the city to put more specific guidelines in place for future development.
We also have a group, the DMC planners meet regularly with the city planners. We call it a technical committee, where we work for hours and hours and hours at a time together to make sure that we're all planning and facing in the same direction. So I think we're hand in glove in terms of working together, and I feel confident that we're all facing the same direction.
I applaud the saving of the Chateau Theater and looking at making that a civic focal piece again. Is there a piece in the plan for funding and some grants for the arts that will support some of these activities? Is that a piece of this?
Sure. We have integrated cultural uses throughout the plan, as Peter mentioned. And so as we go forward with strategies, we are looking at those strategies as part of the funding structure. But the specific projects and how that funding gets developed, again, would have to be part of a strategic discussion by the board, and then each project would have to come forward. So it's hard to say an exact percentage or an exact project at this point. But do projects qualify? Yes. Have we integrated them in a plan and in a way that they will and can be considered? Yes. So it's really at this point important to bring those forward. Again, one thing that we also have to consider as we bring projects forward is the sustainable piece of it too. So as we think about those things, it's really important to ground every project in a sustainable reality, not just from the standpoint of a finance plan to get it built, but also from an operating plan. So the best advice as you all think about this is to be thinking about those pieces as well.
Question in the back.
Evening. I'm curious about populating with residents the downtown. Have you guys thought about numbers, goals, things like that? How many people do you need living downtown to sustain the kinds of spaces that you're envisioning?
Bill or Kimberly?
Yeah, that was actually as part of the market analysis, one of the land uses we looked at and felt pretty optimistic about is the opportunity to introduce housing in downtown, because there's a segment of the market that where people want to live in a more walkable or environment, semi-urban environment, but also to live closer to their jobs. And you have as an advantage here, as an attraction, your major regional employer being here and so many jobs located in a concentrated area. So the opportunity to live close to where you work, not have to drive to get to work, take a short walk to get to work is appealing. There's also, we've learned from Mayo and other employers that when they do draw every year people from around the country to come work here, and folks are looking for other housing options. Some will choose suburban locations, some will choose tract homes, some will choose a more urban environment. So we do think that there's that opportunity to start that market and build it. And there's a point I've found in other cities where you reach a tipping point where you get enough critical mass, you start to support services to that neighborhood. And especially when you reach that point where you support a grocer, then people know this is a real neighborhood. And then you see even more demand occurring after that. And this is a 20-year plan, but there's opportunity, of course, to do more beyond the 20 years. Life doesn't end in 20 years. So So that's a key component of the plan. The other thing, last thing on this is we've also found in looking at these examples around the country, they consider housing and workforce housing part of their economic infrastructure. And so having that kind of environment offered near your job, we think is an important ingredient to help not only your existing economic base, but to diversify into new technology bases associated with the life sciences here.
In the front.
Pride of residential ownership is a strong sustainable component of the urban village, and most of the housing mix that I hear mentioned so far sounds like it's mostly rental. What percentage of that would be available for ownership?
You know, the market's going to determine that. What's presented is a variety of multifamily. So typically you would see ranging from townhomes, even small lot, single homes at the edges, but townhomes, row homes, flats, to an occasional tower here and there. And it's that combination of variety that provides options for the consumers. As we look at it, it's multifamily. The type of ownership for multifamily varies. There's rental, there's condominiums that are owned, there's co-ops as well. So there are different forms of how it's occupied. It's very common to see that they start off with the rental market and then maybe more the luxury rental market. As people get used to living there and finding it's nice, then some people decide, you know, I'd like to buy a place here. And then that starts to create a demand for condominiums that maybe didn't exist before.
In the back.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation, and there's really just a lot to like here as far as I'm concerned. I would echo some of the statements made earlier about building in sustainability and renewable energy projects and energy conservation projects. And I would actually just say two things about that. One is that it sounds like you have already considered the whole LEED certification green building component where you're sort of building in energy efficiency into like the fabric of the buildings and the infrastructure of the buildings, and I think that's really great and commendable. I think that there's also an opportunity with some of these statement projects, like I'm forgetting what it's called, but it's in the heart of the city section where you basically put a roof on a block. And I know it has a fancy name, but I mean, there's no reason that you know, I'm guessing fairly expensive and very visually striking project couldn't be done with, say, solar panels or some of the new thin film coatings that have a solar voltaic component. And so I think that if you guys can use your creativity and planning ability to try to find some of those opportunities, then you'll have some of these big statement projects that will also have like a really good sound sustainability underpinning, and I think that's going to be a real win for the community. The other quick thing I'll just throw in, since I know you're not supposed to do two things, is that if you can find ways to use some of the energy conservation and sustainability technologies to make some of this housing more affordable. I know that you're already planning on doing a mix, but that's sometimes a painless way to provide that opportunity. And we certainly have a problem with affordable housing already in Rochester. So anyway, thank you for your ideas, and it all looks very good so far.
Thank you. Thanks. Did you guys notice a little theme going on here? You're all very tricky because you do more than one question, but you put them together into one. Very tricky group we have. Where am I looking? Over here?
So apparently sustainability is a topic for tonight.
Yes.
And on the topic of sustainability in construction, has anybody reached out to the local trade unions to start talking about how their practices in building might need to change and how might they need to educate their workforce differently in order to support this?
That hasn't, the reaching out hasn't happened yet, but it certainly is one of the tools that we will have as part of the framework again, looking at materials, best practices, using construction materials that are within the region. All of these strategies will be part of the framework, and that discussion will be included as part of our reach out.
Great. Thank you. Over here.
You touched on affordable housing, and there are a vast number of seniors that live in senior affordable housing downtown, and I didn't see any buildings there. Are you planning on keeping that here, or are they going to be displaced?
Peter?
Well, actually, one of the things that we found in all of our urban developments is that cities, just like Rochester, are excellent places for seniors to live. They have convenient access to all the services, healthcare and shops. They also are in buildings that have elevators, so they don't have to worry about stairs. So I think the whole plan really not only caters to those best and brightest new residents of Rochester, but I think we're creating a very comfortable, attractive environment for seniors. The plan, the senior housing that currently exists in the downtown remains in the plan. And again, as we said earlier, we will build housing that's market-driven, but also to address the seniors that are moving into cities, not just in Rochester, but across the country. So it is part of the plan.
There is a waiting list at, oh, I'm sorry. Right now, there's a waiting list at every single Section 8 house. Sometimes it's a year. And I didn't hear anything specific about either keeping what's here and or expanding the availability.
With the way the plan is set up, the plan is an implementation framework and a vision, again, that's largely market-driven. There is pent-up demand in the market for senior housing and affordable housing and workforce housing, all of those things. There's an extraordinary pent-up demand for that. What the plan is supposed to do and what the funding is supposed to do is to help facilitate, incent, and grow through strategic investments. We don't determine what projects specifically get built on what blocks, but we are setting up a strategy that says you need a mix of housing, you need a mix of generations, you need to address the workforce housing issues, the affordable housing issues in order to have a robust community. We strongly recommend those things, and we believe that the market will respond to that. And then those projects will have to be evaluated again on a project-by-project basis within the framework of the plan.
Question here?
This question is directed to Lisa Clark.
Oh, great.
When the leadership at the clinic began brainstorming the concept of DMC, was there agreement as to how many new patients would have to come to Mayo per year to keep this project going forward?
It's a great question, and actually it's a great opportunity for me to clarify what DMC is. So as Mayo brought some concepts forward about DMC along with the community members, it really wasn't about bringing new patients to Rochester. It was about enhancing the experience for our patients. A lot of DMC is about driving visitation to Rochester, not just to visit the clinic, but to do other things in Rochester, Minnesota that perhaps we don't have today. So the plan really is about patients and keeping the experience optimal for our patients, but it's really about driving other people to Rochester, Minnesota. So we do have marketing groups at Mayo that are doing marketing to patients, and that's alongside of our DMC plan.
I have a question to follow up with his. With the sustainability that is going to be required for the amount of money that's going to be spent, has there been consideration given to promotion of other businesses coming to town other than the medical environment? Is there been a strategic planning on how to get more businesses in town to make it more varied outside of Mayo Clinic to make it more employers available for people to work for.
Bill, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, a key component, and actually the foundation of the Discovery Square district within the plan, is to diversify the economic base into technology industries that leverage the base that you already have. So in areas such as life sciences, biomed, telemed, medical technology and services, methods research. There's a lot going on there that generate new products and services, and the hope is to diversify the economic base by going into those natural extensions of your existing economic base here. That includes technology, which may not be other types of technology that are converging with life sciences, like in areas of telecommunications or information technology. And then the other idea within it, and looking at the best examples too, is that they also create a component or vehicle for young companies to get started. So it's not just attraction, which is a part of it, but it's also creating your own industries and services and providing that support network and space for that to occur. That's a key idea behind the whole Discovery Square area, and probably the major economic development component of this whole plan.
Over here.
Very interesting program. What is in your projections on residential property tax increases?
So I can't remember, I think it was 2,800 units of housing that we're projecting to be built within the Destination Medical Center. In addition, I think I have that number wrong. Do I have that number wrong? We're building housing. And also, in addition, there will be new employees working within the district that will also be choosing to live within Rochester, not necessarily in the district, but in other places. I will tell you, the exercise of projecting property taxes was quite complex. We did work very closely with the city to try and understand how property taxes are calculated and measured here, and we do realize that it is a political decision as well. And so what we did is we worked with them to figure out how taxes are currently levied, and we had several different scenarios that we're actually working through currently to understand how that would affect the residents. We do know that the city council does approve what the city needs in terms of property taxes, and then it gets distributed down. From our program, the way that we calculated was up. And so we looked at what averages are now, and we grew those forward kind of at the same rate as they've been growing historically for residential uses.
So the revenue, the tax revenue, is projected to increase as the tax base increases, but the tax rate was assumed to be similar to what currently exists.
Here.
First, I'd like to say thank you for the breadth of the presentation tonight. It was remarkable in terms of both.
I have a green.
Can you hear me now? Thank
There
you
you
for
go.
the breadth of the presentation, both in terms of technical details, financing, vision, et cetera. The question I'd like to focus on is the framework technique for decision making. I'd like to know if there are other cities in which you have outlined frameworks and how they have worked and where we could look for examples. These are very complex decisions, which you know. They sort of weight things on an immediate basis, on a long-term basis. And one of the key things in this city is that there have been many big developments. We tend to try to build whole blocks. Within the vision, you showed alleys. You showed it coming off of Peace Plaza, maintaining alleys and doing small connections. So I'd give that as one example of how do you weight that. But mostly I'd like to know other places where you've implemented something like this so we can look at it and see what it looks like.
I'm going to let Bill give you some examples of other cities, and then I'm going to tell you how that applies to what is in, how it applies, it doesn't apply to the framework, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, obviously there are many examples, around the country, around the world, but let's say in the U.S., anywhere from the San Francisco, which is a very highly performance-based, regulated environment, to Houston, which doesn't have zoning, so and everything in between. In terms of downtown regeneration, there are a few approaches. Some jurisdictions really leverage the decision-making entitlement process and certainly public funding on a case-by-case basis driven by a policy. So each project becomes a discretionary decision, goes through a review process, and then some of the value that's created is captured back to help implement and finance the plan. San Francisco would be an example of that. Vancouver would be, British Columbia would be an example of that. Arlington, Virginia, perhaps. Other jurisdictions take the perspective of trying to create a very flexible and by right almost implementation entitlement structure, so that projects that are coming in that are consistent and implementing the plan come in with very low transaction costs and can happen quickly to provide an incentive to attract the capital to make it happen. But the project has to fit the plan. So it's the regulatory system is designed to implement the plan rather specifically. And the one area where there might be review would be design review. And so that's a system that's trying to create an incentive to implement and a disincentive to try to not implement the plan. So that's another model. A third model, which crosses both, is strategic public investment to induce development to occur in certain areas and in certain ways. And the decision-making about that public investment is tied to also decisions about private investment, so they work hand in hand together to try to make that happen. Maybe Portland, Tom's not here, it might be an example of that.
So I would add to that, as Bill was saying, there are a lot of good examples of urban regeneration through district development, and so that concept of creating a district and moving forward is not unusual. What's unusual in this case is the way the funding model works. In most cases, you would have a very different system. In this case, what we were able to secure was the $585 million commitment up front. We were able to define sort of the rules of the road of how that applies through the legislative process. And so again, going back to the types of projects that can be reviewed, we were able to define where, both economic development, which allows us to do all the things that people have talked about, from everything from catalytic developments to culture to infrastructure improvements. It gave that flexibility. At the same time, it put controls in place. So there's a balance, that balance I was talking about. The DMCC board can't unilaterally make a move on its own and determine anything that's happening in a project review. The city council can also, with respect to these funds, not make any move on its own without both bodies weighing in and agreeing. And that balance is critical, and it's unique. I can't give you an example of where this has been done exactly this way before. It was done strategically, it was intentional, and I think at the end of the day, we'll end up with a very fair and vibrant community, because it requires everybody to work together, not just within the city, but within the state and the region.
So let's do a couple more questions. One in the back. One here and then one there.
To all the planners that are up front, thank you for your efforts. We appreciate it. We did hear earlier today from the mayor of our city that he was very pleased that the light rail in Portland went from Portland International Airport to downtown. You may also be aware that we've had significant effort recently to expand our air service from Rochester International Airport to various cities across the nation. We have not seen or heard, however, how the transportation will be dealt with between our Rochester International Airport and downtown directly for either on light rail or other modes of transportation. I'm wondering when that portion of the transportation mix is going to be discussed.
So we certainly recognize the great importance of the Rochester Airport and continued air service into a town that has a lot of visitors and will continue to grow that over the course of the DMC. There's some basic market principles driven by number of visitors and level of service and continuity of service that's really required to merit a rail project to an airport. So the types of cities you see building rail to the airport, Portland's probably actually on the smaller end of the spectrum. Places like Seattle, cities of a couple million, 3 million metro area with major international airports can justify that level of investment, which, you're looking at that type of light rail, $180 million per mile, a very large investment. What we do think is something that's valid to look at is improved bus service to the airport potentially. You look at places like Spokane that have strong regional airports. Spokane actually runs 30-minute bus service between downtown and the airport. It's quite a successful service. They run the service all day. It's reliable for people who come regularly. So we do think that connection's important. We don't think that probably even within the course of this plan, a rail connection would make economic sense.
You did just talk about the implementation of the plan. Could you maybe repeat a little bit of that? When this is adopted, when the development plan is approved and finalized, what's the chance that an uncooperative developer can buy up a couple of blocks and put up a hotel and screw up the whole thing?
This is a living environment. There are, when people go into plans, there's sort of, there's any number of kinds of plans, but the extreme is probably a master plan where you can come in and, really you control all the land, you determine what the development is, and you move forward. This is not that. This is an urban environment, and things will change. The plan will evolve based on market forces. So the intent of this plan is not to stop development. The intent of this plan is to strategically help guide development. Part of the role of the EDA is to work with developers, because what the plan is doing is setting a framework that's really good for everyone. And so what we need to do is work with the developers to say, this is really the highest, best use for this land. It's these are the best types of development that can occur, and here's what you'd want to see in this area, and begin to guide that. That can be further guided through entitlements and incentives and those sorts of things. And I don't know, Peter, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, because we went through this transition in San Diego where for some communities were suburban and didn't want the urban environment, and some communities wanted the urban context. And so we had what we called planned district ordinances that applied to those areas. And in the urban communities, they were all mixed use. So it wasn't really a land use question. It was more about character and attributes. And so the PDOs were a regulatory approach for doing that.
I would just add that as you saw in the master plan vision, we've placed a lot of emphasis on creating a very vibrant public realm. So as we go forward into the implementation, if we can establish great spaces for development to occur around, the development and the uses and the buildings and the owners will evolve and change over time. If we can establish the places, that will be our best insurance on establishing the larger visions of the plan. So from the design side, creating those public spaces will really ensure the type of environment that we're really trying to create.
Question over here. You've been so patient.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
I'd just like to go back to the Chateau Theater and to the comment, Lisa, that you made in the planning of DMC at Mayo, developing other attraction for this city was a major part of the process. Those of us who are involved in the arts community in this city have starved for a quality performance space, from the orchestra to civic music to what have you. It would appear that what you've done is at least you put a name potentially to a space, which is the Chateau Theater. There are some other plans that have been out there that have been developed over the years that are something different, but we're all desirous of having a space that has multiple use that could really attract people to this community. Is that what the intent is of what you at least have sketched out with the Chateau Theater? And if it is, what is the best way for those of us who are very interested in this portion of the project? What's the best way for us to engage with you to see that we can make this happen?
Well, I think what we show is a vision that doesn't focus exclusively on the Chateau Theater, but shows how the Chateau Theater can be part of a larger vision for Peace Plaza. I think everyone agrees that returning the Chateau Theater to a movie house and a performance space and a facility that can be used for cultural venues is really what we want to do. And what we've tried to do is create a mix of uses and an environment around the Chateau Theater that will really benefit from that type of use. Having it as a bookstore was maybe a good way to preserve the building itself, but it really didn't reflect what the building really wants to be. And so we're going to leverage the imagery of the building and the spirit of the theatrical place to create the light pavilion and First that will reinforce that as a facility that returns to a cultural venue.
In terms of, where are you? There you are. In terms of getting involved, I think that's a great question, because once this plan is approved, which we're aiming for March sometime, that's when we figure out the programming and what goes in these spaces and what goes in the places. So I would say for you to get involved, there are lots of community groups talking about this, particularly this issue. I've heard it a lot, and I think it's great. And I think that we'll have smaller community group meetings, and you can connect directly with the EDA. I think there will be great conversation about programming these facilities, because it's one thing to build something, but it's not gonna thrive unless we program it appropriately with people and activities, and you've seen great examples of that in Rochester already, and I think we can only do better. So thank you for caring, and thank you for bringing that up. Okay, last call. I saw one hand right here. And then you're more than welcome to mill around and look at the boards, and the planners will be available as well.
I work for a small business here in town, and we are already looking hard for people. I'm affiliated with the construction industry, and to hear the kinds of jobs that may be created and the types of jobs that will be needed to build some of these venues, it's pretty overwhelming to think that we could find the number of workers to do that, either now or 5, 10, 15 years into the future. So to your knowledge, is there anyone from the city or county working on getting into the high schools, getting into RCTC, and trying to develop more of a vocation or a trade type expertise to support that construction growth? I just see that as being, we're already dealing with a really difficult place to find people to do work, and this could potentially, make it even more difficult.
I think the answer is yes, and I've got a good friend and colleague, Don Sapala, in the audience who might be able to answer that question better than me. What do you think, Don?
The appropriate people up there for the next couple of years, but we are absolutely looking at putting career and technical programs back in the city, not necessarily in the high school, but through the C-Tech project out on the University of Minnesota. They're thinking about it all the time and working on it, working with businesses to figure out what are the programs that are needed.
Thank you. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you all for being here. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for being attentive. Truly appreciate your enthusiasm and support for DMC. Please know that we have a DMC.MN website where you can see everything that happened today. It's all public. We try to be as transparent as possible. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to call as well. Thank you very much. Feel free to mill around